Samsung S24 comes with two different chipsets. Many of you asked me to compare these two versions together with S23. On the left side, we have the S24 Snapdragon from Canada in Onyx Black. In the middle, we have the S24 Exynos from EU in Marble Grey. On the left, we have the S23 Snapdragon in Lavender, and all the phones are 2 to 3 weeks old. I am Mo and I'm a scientist. Today and tomorrow, I will test the battery of this phone using scientific methods so we know which one lasts longer. This time, I left all gamings and benchmarks out of the equation and concentrated on real-life use cases such as web browsing, social media, camera, video calls, GPS tracking, and navigation with Google Maps. In the last test, many people said why the test is only on 5G. Hence this time, I did a balance between Wi-Fi, 5G, and 4G LTE, and even airplane mode. All three phones are on 500 nits brightness level. As you can see, the brightness level is set manually, and for example, the bar on the S24 Exynos is lower than the S24 Snapdragon. The phones are always connected to the same network type and the same carrier. I started the test by cleaning the RAM using RAM Plus tool, and then connecting to Wi-Fi while putting the phone on the airplane mode. I ran a YouTube short on repeat and also ran YouTube videos on 4K. After 2 hours, S24 Snapdragon was on 91%, S24 Exynos on 90%, and S23 on 88%. This kind of explains why the S24 Exynos often gets a better score than the S23 and is similar to the S24 Snapdragon in other YouTube tests, because most of the tests are on Wi-Fi connection. One thing to note is that even in this simple test, Exynos got 1 degree hotter than the other two phones. I put the SIM card on all three phones and made sure all three are running on the same network. All three SIM cards are from the same carrier called A1, which is the main one in Austria. I even had to fill out a form explaining why I needed 3 SIM cards, and it was a bit suspicious. As you can see, all phones are on the same 5G network, are connected to NR NSA. I continued the YouTube short test. S24 Snapdragon kept a 1% lead. Again, Exynos was running 1 degree hotter compared to S23 and S24 Snapdragon. Then I put the phone on airplane mode to shoot a 4K camera in 60 frames per second. This time, the camera didn't froze like last time, probably because it is on the airplane mode. I continued the test with 3 10-minute exposure camera tests. This time, S24 Exynos was running 2 degrees hotter. Again, the phones are on airplane mode. By the end of the test, the S24 Snapdragon had a 3% lead over the S24 Exynos, and the S23 was 3% behind the Exynos version. I then started the Google Meet test. I connected both phones to Wi-Fi for the first part, and all of them are now talking to each other. During the Wi-Fi test, the S24 Snapdragon increased the lead by another 1%, and the S23 decreased the difference to Exynos by 1%. It seems like Exynos doesn't like processing videos and images. Then I connected all phones to 5G to continue the video call. Only after a few minutes, S24 Exynos pulls out the classic dimming the screen method, which happens whenever it is running more than 45 degrees Celsius. A message popped up indicating Exynos paused video streaming from at least one other phone. A few seconds after, Exynos stopped broadcasting too due to overheating, and I had to finish the test early. As you can see, the Exynos screen is still dim and the phone is trying to cool down itself. I had to let all phones rest for a bit before continuing the test. It seems like Samsung doesn't think it is necessary for their phones to do a video call outside of your home. After half an hour, I was back and I connected all phones to Wi-Fi to test the battery drain while playing chess on Google Chrome. I did a similar test using a 5G connection. In both instances, I didn't find any meaningful differences and all phones used the same percentage of battery. Based on my observation, it looks like in web browsing and social media, all three phones are doing a good job. S23 has a smaller battery capacity, hence the battery percentage goes down faster. Since it's already midnight, I will go to sleep and continue the test in the morning. The next day, I first checked how much battery the phones used. During 7.5 hours, both Snapdragons used exactly 5% battery, while Exynos used 7% battery on the standby mode. All phones were connected to 5G. I again made sure all phones were connected to the same network before going cycling to test the Google Maps navigation battery drain. The test is particularly important if you use your phone for navigation on a daily basis, like for example on your car. Now we are at 55, 48, and 47% batteries. It's a lovely sunny day in Vienna. I'm gonna go for half an hour of activity. I'm gonna navigate through Google Maps, and I put all the phones on my backpack here in the background. The screen is on, the 5G is on. We are gonna test few things, so it's GPS tracking and also the battery and also 5G, because when you are moving, your phone has to work harder, has to connect to different antennas, has to find them, and it just consumes more battery. By the end of the test, S23 took the second place from S24 Exynos. Also, when I was putting the phones on my desk, I felt S24 Exynos was noticeably hotter than the other two. In general, to me, it seems like S24 Exynos has a really hard time being outside and doing anything other than web browsing, which kind of reminds me of myself. But the name suggests a mobile phone should be mobile, which means you should be able to use it outdoors without any problems. Next, I decided to really go an extra mile for this test and travel to another town by train to test the battery drain when the phone is moving. So some of the American friends started to flex on their Snapdragon in the comment section, and I thought we can flex on our public transport. So for the next test, I put all the phones in my backpack, and they are connected to 5G on one route and 4G on the other. So the whole thing is gonna take me around 2 hours, and I'm gonna also have a coffee there, so 4 hours in total. Half of the test is gonna be 5G, the other half is gonna be 4G. While I'm enjoying a rather empty train and passing by Danube, please consider subscribing to the channel and ringing the notification bell to not miss the future tests. Also, let me know in the comments section what should I test next. The train ride was 1 hour, and then I arrived at my destination while the phone was on 5G connection. At the cafe, I changed the connection to 4G and LTE, and the rest of the video, the connection will remain on that. By the end of the train ride, the S24 Snapdragon increased the lead by 11%, and the S23 increased the difference to S24 Exynos by 2%. Exynos is getting bullied by these two Snapdragons. Next, I ran Ida's running app to track my short walk back home. As I mentioned, the phones are staying at 4G LTE, and GPS is now turned on. I'm finally back home, and the S24 Snapdragon is at 33%, while the Exynos is at 21% and S23 is at 24%. I'm going to put all phones on Wi-Fi before trying to drain them all to zero. One thing I should mention is that it is a known fact that no other company other than Qualcomm can compete in efficient 5G modem creation for mobile phones, which also has something to do with their monopoly and patent. Even Apple had to turn to them for their phones. I would say it is brave for Samsung to try doing it in-house. Nevertheless, Samsung could easily avoid this situation and make a deal with Qualcomm to also create efficient modems for their processors. But this is only one part of the problem. As we all see, Exynos perform less efficiently in not only 5G, but also on 4G and airplane mode. I assume if you pay 1,000 euros for a phone, you want to use it more than Wi-Fi web browsing, right? Samsung is advertising this phone as something that can survive 7 years. I doubt a bit this phone can last that long if you plan to live your life outside of your apartment. Look, I'm not arguing that Exynos is a horrible chipset and nobody should buy a device that has Exynos on it. What I argue is that it is not right that Samsung is misleading the customers, not telling on their website what chipset they are using for European users, and selling two different devices with the same price and market it with the same name. If I change the engine of a Ferrari and put a Fiat engine on it, it is not a Ferrari anymore. Fiat is not a bad car. It is just not a Ferrari. Let me know if you agree that Samsung should be legally required to name S24 Exynos differently than S24 Snapdragon. On the 6 hours and 9 minutes mark, S24 Exynos dimmed the screen since it went below 5%. and only 10 minutes later it died on us. S23 still has 4% battery left, but only 3 minutes later, on the 6 hours and 23 minutes mark, it also joined S24 Exynos. Remember, S24 Exynos has a larger battery and larger vapor chamber for cooling, and still S23 did marginally better. The S24 Snapdragon is going strong and has a 15% battery left. S24 Snapdragon ran another 30 minutes before it also gave up on 6 hours and 54 minutes mark. Just one disclaimer, sometimes I forgot to run the stopwatch, and these numbers are relative but not absolute. This result is both impressive and quite sad at the same time. This shows S24 phone is a huge step up compared to the S23, but Samsung decided to shoot itself in the foot by putting a subpar processor for global users. Honestly, S24 could be my new favorite compact device. It seems Samsung loves to destroy the trust of their customers from time to time for short-term benefit. I charged the phones to 100% to show you something. As you saw in the previous video, the result of the telephoto lens is not satisfactory on S24 Exynos. Here, for example, you see the camera took a photo of a blue light chair, but processed it as a white instead on the Exynos version. Both Snapdragons did a much better job capturing this scene. Before we wrap up, I want to answer some questions that were asked in the previous video. Some people ask, Mo, how do you know if your unit is not defective? Well, that's easy to answer. All the benchmarks that I ran got a better score than other S24 Exynos 2400 units. For example, here you can see my unit got a better score compared to 91% of other units. This proves that this is not a defective chipset. Second, some people went after my reputation and said I was fabricating the data. To answer that, I'm going to show you my doctoral degree certificate. This is the first time in my entire life that I have to do that. As you can see, 2 universities that are among the best in computer science in Europe and Asia certified me as a person who is qualified to do research and testing based on scientific methods. Third, a lot of people said that they're happy with their Exynos. The thing is, happiness is a subjective feeling and cannot be quantified. The truth is, most people won't start to notice the issues with Exynos until the device hits summertime. Since based on my test, the Exynos variant is always running hotter, it is also gonna degrade the internal parts and battery gradually. Also, 15% less screen time is not something that is noticeable by an average user. That's why in research we always quantify feelings such as happiness and satisfaction. If you like this kind of content, you are also going to enjoy the next comparison that I made and popping up on the screen right now. Thanks for tuning into TechMo, and until the next one, bye!